even in a progressive social justice, open society foundation, the dynamic is one fund's or campaign's gain is another's loss, and how to navigate that, I don't have the answer, but that's real.
I actually think there are more people out there in our field that would move this work if they were supported in doing so. Every foundation that we talk to, we do this training where it says, okay, now what? Now what do we do? And we still have the capacity in the field to support the folks that want to do this work.
What we're struggling with now is, how to include a focus on boys and men of color across the whole programmatic effort of the foundation. But the key, I think, for us is certainly figuring out how to make sure there's accountability mechanisms internally. And one of the things that it's actually playing out in our organization is having clear metrics around boys and men of color impact, at least from the strategy perspective, across the whole foundation. So it's going to be in Bob Ross's CEO goals that the board's going to hold them accountable to. It's going to be in the evaluation across our 3 programmatic priorities. We're still working that out, but it's going to be structurally in the strategic plan. The question is, when the plan is over, right, 10 years later, when Ross is gone, does the endowment continually have this perspective?
So these are essentially some of the questions that we want to answer today. How are boys and young men of color being framed in the news media? And I think you could just even do this and just say, how are boys and young men of color being framed in the media? It could be entertainment, it could be gaming, it could be the news media, etc. How can we reframe the conversation to build public support for efforts to invest in young men of color? What can we do to make sure that our frames take hold? And how do we get the media to cover our issues? So this is another example of just to kind of, we're calling this one the bad parent frame. It's a dominant cultural framework that exists. This is a version that was in the Oakland Tribune article. It's a systemic problem with Oakland. The root cause is parenting or lack thereof. Change the way the families of these, and I noticed the quotes around black boys. That kind of gave me the chills. View education and discipline, then you will see improvement. So the thing that's interesting is, for me, these quotes around black boys, very telling. It said something to me. What does it say to folks in this room? It's an indictment. But it's also a way to say them. Not us, them. And I don't believe that we're going to solve the challenges that we're facing if all of America sees us as them. So
but everything you just put up is also them against the rest of them. Even the first 3 quotes.
Yep.
That's all still.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
People who can't control their kids.
That's right.
In that sense. So.
Yeah, it's us, them.
Most of us, I think, have some sort of online presence, right? I have a website, for instance, a blog called New Black Man, and so I'm always searching for content. One of the reasons why I was interested in Studology 101, right, because these websites have to be dynamic. If we're not presenting new content on websites on a daily basis, folks don't come to the websites. You increase traffic by making sure that the content is dynamic. So you're always in this need for content, right? And you see this on Twitter. Folks on Twitter are always looking for content. They're hungry for that. And so what happens is when you get folks who are doing incredible content, and YouTube allows you to embed anything, so it allows you to share that content, which not only brings traffic to your own individual site, but it also allows you to celebrate quality work that's out there and get that to audiences that, say, Studology might not be able to reach.
It all depends on what the content is. Is it the kind of thing that somebody would, people don't just share any old video.
Yeah, right.
We were all kind of talking about the medium and not the message. I think what kids have that we don't have is they know what other young people will be willing to consume.
Right.
You knew what
Right.
other people would, you kid too.
Right.
You knew what other people but you knew that when, or somebody knew when they did the thing 50 Cent Barack, somebody knew this is going to be the kind of thing that young people are going to love.
Yeah.
So it depends on how it's into your bite size, but it's not just the size. It's what's the message? And so it doesn't, all this stuff will work integrated together, and I think that it is driven by a younger demographic, but it's not the messenger, it's the message, I think.
Good morning, everyone. Really, really happy to have everyone here for day 2. It was an awesome beginning to the meeting yesterday with the panel that we had, and I think we have a unique opportunity today to have something that is going to be as equally inspiring. So I'd like to welcome them up here and really tell them thank you for taking their time to come and speak with us today. We look forward to it.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I've never had anybody be so understanding of the kind of work that we do, that I do, and thank you very much. It's an honor to be here among such distinguished folk, and it's an honor to be here with my brother, which is a rare thing for us in a public sphere, but if I can tell you just how excited I was when we were asked to be at the same place at the same time, my family will only know just how excited I was, because my brother is a wonderful friend in addition to family members. Some of us have family, but we don't always get along with family. Is that right? You know, in our household, I'll just share a little. My father was like a common sense guy. I believe you can be smart all you want, but if you haven't got any common sense, you don't have any sense at all. My mother was more like, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock landed on us. So it's sort of an interesting set of ideas and policies in our household that we as children tried to navigate as I think about it. But in the 2 projects that were mentioned so gracefully, there's a couple of things I've learned. And one of those things is that I think our children need and deserve a racial literacy in this so-called post-racial America. I'm not sure that our boys of color are thought of as children. And that the most harmful psychological assault that we have seen in our work on black and brown children is that we stop seeing them as children. And in a way, in the work that we're doing, we see that every day, that young kids have behaviors, black and brown kids, and still people don't want to see them as children. There are 4 recommendations I would make. First, to researchers and program leaders, to report the dynamics, not just the demographics, of racial disparity. That in some respects, it's the game of racial disparity that we need to discuss, not just that there are disparities. It's not simply that black and brown boys are few in number or less than the majority. It's how we get to that position that's most important. The elephant in the room is not the factual nature of race disparity. It is the dance of racial disparity making. Disaggregating data is necessary but not sufficient. The second point is recognize that there is diversity among boys of color. That not only do we have to know how boys of color are disenfranchised, we have to gather data and provide services that address the differences between boys of color's strengths and challenges. All boys of color are not disenfranchised similarly, and we need to know the unique stereotypes, histories, stressors, risk, and protective factors for each, and integrate these in our research and our intervention programs. Third, racial stress is easier to deal with than racism. We can see racial stress. The neuroscience data on this is compelling. We do not have to leave our children alone in dealing with a world that's both visible and invisible about its hostility. Fourth, we have to give our children the talk and the walk. And by that, racial literacy has to be sort of like a protective gear, like a raincoat. It's not simply enough to let kids know about history. Those courses in schools that we have them around culture are important, but how do we have an emotional attachment to that history that isn't back then, that is happening to me right now? What skill sets do I need to use my voice when somebody disrespects me that doesn't get me in trouble? but yet doesn't make me feel like I walk away like a punk and have to retaliate later on to regain my dignity. And this is not just from authority figures of police and teachers and parents, but also other brothers who look like me. How do I use my voice?
Well, I think it's very easy for you to see why I look up to my older brother. It is really quite a privilege for us to have this space together. We grew up in a poor rural community. It was southern, it was rural, but it was also very poor. We had two rooms in our house. There were 5 of us. And until we were teenagers, my brother and my dad and I would all have to share these 2 little tiny twin beds. And when I was a little boy, I would always want to sleep in the crack. You know, when you got 3 people in 2 little tiny beds, somebody has to be in the middle, and what we called the crack. And it was really not a full mattress to support the person in the middle. And then as we got older, it used to be fun to be in the crack because, you know, you'd have your brother and you'd have your dad next to you. But as you got bigger, the crack was no fun. You really had no place to go. They could move a little bit, but you were just stuck there in the middle. And as I got older, as I was the youngest, I would just kind of accept that it was my role to be in the crack. But every now and then, my brother would look at me and say, "Okay, I'll sleep in the crack tonight." I said, "You don't have to do that." He said, "No, I'll do it." And without really asking, without really understanding, there was this knowledge of what my needs were that he had before I did. And so when he started playing soccer, I started playing soccer. We'd never seen a soccer game in our lives. But we went out there and started playing. He started playing, I went right behind him. And when he went to a small Christian college outside of Philadelphia, I said, that's where I'm going. And when he joined the choir, I joined the choir. And I mentioned that because there is something incredibly important about relationships. We're working with children now who have been so traumatized, so broken by the experiences that they have had. There is no way out for them that is not dependent on a relationship, a meaningful, transformative relationship. Now, we are very arrogant about history in America. We don't really think about our mistakes very much. And yet there's something really necessary about appreciating those mistakes for kids of color. I absolutely believe that. Omar Ninham is a Native American. He's the only child in the state of Wisconsin who's been sentenced to die in prison. Before he was actually sent to prison, after he was arrested for this crime, his tribe that had been disconnected from him for years found out about him, and they actually claimed him and brought him to the reservation and started working with him. And for the 9 months before he was actually taken back by the state, he showed all kinds of signs of recovery. And when we talked to the tribal leaders about what they were doing with him, they had something very simple to say. We said, we were just telling him who he was. We were just showing him who he was. We were retelling the story of his history. And we were trying to get him to appreciate that his history is not a history of failure, but a history of survival. We were trying to document for him that he's got the power within him to overcome much bigger obstacles than anything that he thinks he can. That sense of history is absolutely key. I was giving some lectures in Germany not too long ago about the death penalty, and when I finished, it was astonishing because one of the German scholars stood up and she said, you know, it's really fascinating to hear you talk about these problems of race and the death penalty in America. She said, we don't have the death penalty in Germany. And she said, we don't talk about this very much, but she says, we can never have the death penalty in Germany. We understand, as a result of our experience with the Holocaust, that we can never again engage in the systematic killing of a human being. We cannot do it. It would dishonor everything we are trying to recover from those dreadful years. And in fact, we just know that it would be unconscionable. And I thought about that as I was flying back to the US, and I started thinking, yeah, what would it feel like to live in a world where the nation state of Germany was still executing people? And then what would it feel like if the people they were disproportionately executing were Jewish? And then I realized it would be unconscionable. I couldn't make peace with a world like that. And then I got off the plane in Alabama and started walking around where buried in the ground are the bodies of thousands of African Americans who've been lynched. And then I got in my car and I drove down to death row where 84% of the people are African American. It became clear to me that this disconnect with history is very much a function of the way in which our policy making has been corrupted by a lack of awareness, In 1940, the United States government created concentration camps for Japanese Americans. And we put them away because they were Japanese. And for years, we deprived them of land and basic dignity and services because of pure bigotry. Now, our experience around immigration and our immigration policies and our thinking about undocumented people and Latinos and others who are being profiled cannot really be fair and just until we think about the experience of Japanese internment. But we don't think historically about these things. And so I do think that there is this critical need to put in context these realities.
Because there's one thing that comes up, which is it ain't a real debate until someone bangs on the table.
This meeting started out, as I mentioned before, as a vision and a dream in my mind, and I could not have imagined that it would turn out anything like this. For those of you who don't know our organization well, I don't think anyone has been able to organize a meeting with this many people of color, all in the same place, coming from a variety of sectors, a variety of perspectives, and being open to hearing what you have to say. This is as much about you learning from one another as about us learning about what we should do.
Parents, politicians, preachers, peers must learn to give that talk before our little lions walk into the supermarket. Drugstore, corner store, superstore, shoe store, white school, black school, preschool. At the community pool down the block, up the road a piece, over Ray Ray's house. While walking, while driving, while learning, while standing on the corner, while talking to my homies, while scoring a touchdown, while watching TV, before they get stopped by the police or the teacher, before they go back out again. We must get with our little and big boys to usher them through what is, for some, a short roller coaster ride. Leaders, parents, politicians, presidents must be bodacious enough to love them with our presence, challenge them with our ideas, and touch them with our hugs and kisses. Before we send our little lions into the world where the hunters hide behind bushes of institutional authority and circumstance, behind racial profiling and post-racial rhetoric, let us not send them without our dreams, our definitions, our stripes, our images, our comeback lines, and our stories.
I think more than anything, Howard and I are here to tell you to keep your eyes on the prize and hold on. We have an opportunity with all of the talent, with all of the ability, with all of the intellect, with all of the passion in this room, to be an army of janitors, to be an army of people who understand that the true essence of intervention for children at risk resonates. It's found not only in our minds, but in our hearts. And sometimes we just have to hold our kids and get them to understand that this is a struggle, this is a journey, and we've got to keep our eyes on the prize and hold on. Thanks very much, I appreciate it.